oftentimes we don't make the connections that are most evident to us. The Isaiah text that Emily read this morning is one such text. Like she said, it's one of these Advent readings. Arise and shine, for your light has come. But then it comes up later on in the life and times that are there. So it's interesting that Matthew applies that very text, that very observation of the light coming to those who sit in darkness, to the early days of Jesus' ministry. That's the connection that we have here as Matthew begins to tell his story of the light coming and shining, and what that means for all involved. And as we have that connection and know that connection is more than just the trivia of how do the prophets and the Gospels speak to each other, but also how do we begin to understand the movement of God from the very beginning through the periods of exile and coming and going all the way into Jesus and all the way into now, and how that lives to light our own world. This is the promise as told by Matthew. This is Matthew 4:12 through 25. Now when Jesus heard that John was arrested, he went to Galilee. He left Nazareth and settled in Capernaum, which lies alongside the sea of Zebulun and Naphtali. This fulfilled what Isaiah the prophet said. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, alongside the sea, across the Jordan, Galilee and of the Gentiles, the people who lived in darkness had seen a great light, and the light came upon those who lived in the region and in the shadow of death. From that time, Jesus began to announce, change your hearts and lives, here comes the kingdom of God. As Jesus walked alongside the Galilee Sea, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, throwing nets into the sea because they were fishermen. Come and follow me, he said, and I will show you how to fish for people. Right away they left their nets and followed him. Continuing on, he saw another set of brothers, James the son of Zebedee and his brother John. They were in a boat with Zebedee their father, repairing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Jesus traveled throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues. He announced the good news of the kingdom and healed every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread throughout Syria. People brought him all those who had various kinds of diseases, those in pain, those possessed by demons, those with epilepsy, and those who were paralyzed. And he healed them. Large crowds followed him from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and from those areas beyond the Jordan River. Are you a disciple? Well, are you? It's not a question that we get every day, And thankfully, we don't have necessarily a little membership card that we can say, yep, sure I am. I know it's not one that I've been asked in my living memory. Not because it's out of place or out of time, but it's just not how we generally think about living our lives of faith. Being a disciple, as God out with the kids, is being a student, being a follower, modeling after one who we follow. We're much more given to the self-determined, individualistic, I believe what I believe, and I happen to believe that of Jesus, than necessarily being, I am a disciple. But yet we're invited to be exactly that. A person who follows after someone, shaping their lives in the image of the one who they follow the best that they know how. We are far more inclined to see ourselves as believing in something and being philosophically aligned with the life that is there, and having our confession of faith that says, yes, here are the 26 points that we believe, even though there's a lot of commentary after that. Then they necessarily say, we're disciples, and we follow after. Besides, in Sunday school, we learned that there were 12 disciples, 11 in due time. It was the name of the band, Jesus and the Disciples. They're the originals and never to be imitated. Kind of like John, Paul, Ringo, and George made up the Beatles, we might think that the boat of being disciples has well sailed. We know that Thaddeus, like George, keeps being left out of the list and forgotten from the band. We made this way of being and of following Christ a matter of history and trivia to be learned, than a matter of recording and passing on a spiritual identity and inspiration that is ours and is alive. We need to be instructed as a matter of institution, a set of beliefs, more than necessarily, do you want to be a disciple here and now? But when you look at the Gospels, when you look at the way the story is told, we have exactly that sort of instruction manual of how to do exactly this, being a disciple. And that's true of Matthew in particular. Just a brief orientation. This reading is directly before the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. And it recounts the new recruits beginning their transformation right before they had the most formative speech of what does it mean to then be a disciple. From the very beginning, when Jesus comes and invites the first disciples to get up and leave everything and follow him, they are off and running into what is next. This continues to the end when they meet the risen Christ, receiving their marching orders for living life after Jesus himself was physically returning to the Father. Time and again, Jesus offers the wisdom of a disciple, and stories and parables that we so neatly pull apart for theological nuggets, and occasionally warns the form of wondering, okay, what does this basically mean as we follow Jesus as disciples? And when Jesus encounters them at the end of their course of study, right after the resurrection, as they are shaped in form formed, but their failures is every bit as much as their successes, went no further than the death and resurrection as being exhibit A. Matthew gives them the job of becoming the fishers of people that they were asked and initially invited to be. John's gospel ends the scene with them getting on with life, only to be interrupted by the risen Christ interrupting them and giving them instructions and sending them out. Matthew tells them about those meeting Jesus in Galilee and receiving a commission to go and to do the work of discipleship. And so the tradition begins. Disciples make other disciples. And not just by love and marriage, but disciples make disciples and bring other disciples along the way too. As I said, we don't often think of these terms, not natively in any case. We have so much ology in our theology that we forget that we're called to a life of doing and a life of being. We come to Jesus most often because we are looking for something, for healing or love or hope and salvation. It's our need that often sends us in a Godward direction. That was true when Jesus was with us in the flesh, and it's equally true now, if not more so. Sometimes one of the biggest challenges that we have about inviting people into discipleship and to following Jesus is, well, why would I need to do that? Life is okay as it is. I'm doing well enough, I'm doing okay enough. Why would I want something else? And culturally, we're given to saying, you only ask for something when you're really hurting. But when we only have Jesus there to give us what we need when we are hurting, we don't also have Jesus going beyond that and inviting us into what Jesus is really all about being disciples and about following what God is doing right along His own way. I'd even say that it's better to think of Jesus as the primary disciple of all disciples. Jesus is always reflected back into what God is about and into what the Father is doing and what the Father is about. Illustrating that and teaching that where He can and inviting others to do the same. We get tied up with our whole Trinitarian ideas of, well, Jesus is God and God is Jesus and Spirit is in there somewhere we don't quite know where. That we also forget that Jesus points to something bigger than what Jesus is as only Jesus. And that's where discipleship begins. In the life that is more fully to be lived than what we can ever really know. And that we're invited into being fully human. So when we talk about being disciples, we naturally turn to this text because it's emblematic. It's the starting place of being a disciple. Come and follow me, and they dropped everything and immediately followed. I always find the action in this text amazing. Jesus comes along the way, he knows who and what he wants, and invites his guys to drop everything and follow him, and they do. Which gives us the impression that that is the prototypical way to do discipleship. And it's amazing testimony. But I always wonder at what it means and what it's all there. And I often wonder whether that too might be a barrier for our own discipleship. How many of us wouldn't reach into our pocket and check our calendar if Jesus were to come and ask us to come and follow him? I mean, honestly. If the only way to be a good disciple is to be the disciple that leaves everything, even the work in the fields, then what shot do the rest of us have? Which is why I like to think about it in a somewhat different way. Just as saying yes is amazing, I also think we do ourselves a favor by wondering whether there might be something more there. Maybe they dropped everything, come and follow Jesus, and saying, fishing has been slow the last couple of days. We won't be missed. Let's take a long weekend and see what happens. But then as discipleship being what it is, the long weekend turns into a week and a month and a time. And the next thing you know, they don't know how to recognize themselves. So changed are they into something new that they didn't expect. Perhaps his calling was the beginning of their journey with Jesus and the planting of the seeds that became into full flower as it grew over time. I think this fits a bit better the human experience that we know and live with. And I'd even say it's just as valid as you drop everything and come. Whether they left fully convinced or merely curious, to me doesn't matter. In fact, it's a bit truer to what we know in this world. What really does matter here is that they take steps at all and that they follow on in any case. I say this because we can easily find ourselves in this comparison. Like I said, the only way to be a good disciple is to be the exemplary disciple. We hold ourselves to that of Peter, Andrew, James, and John, and we likely have our disciple stories that we hold up as exactly that. Oh, they got it right because they did this and that and the other. And we're moved and motivated by the sense of what they knew in their lives. Yet we know that somehow it's not always as encompassing as leaving nets and fathers behind. And we wonder whether we measure up as we do that. We wonder whether our way is really the right way in any case, and whether we have been changed by the one who we do follow. We do not hold discipleship as part of our identity, and we're called to be. And it can be hard to know how do we best proceed into the life that we want to live, into the way that God is calling us. And there's an ongoing conversation always to be had of what does discipleship look like today, right here, right now. We may not regularly claim the identity of disciples, claim our identity as disciples among our various activities, but we know that we are being shaped by the one who we follow. We have been shaped by God and by following Jesus. We are invited to live out the way and mean showing God in a world desperately wanting to see Christ with us. And we know that these influences can come deeply, even if not always consciously. Among one of the shocks of being a parent are those moments of memory and occasion where I have to stop and say, oh shoot, I've become my father. Because the way that I respond, the way that I talk, or even just the lame joke that I just made, just sounds exactly like Dad. Not that that's a bad thing, Dad. I know you're watching. But because it just simply comes out that way. We have been shaped by those who we are modeled by, even without our knowing it. And it's a compliment to be reminded that we remind others of those who came before us. Yet it's hard not to laugh at ourselves when it does happen all the same. We cannot underestimate the power of following after someone and the power that that has on our lives. We are all shaped by who we follow. And we do always follow people. Some we have selected and some we are simply stuck with. Others we choose carefully for their qualities and character that offer into our lives. Discipleship is one of those things that we often think about but are not always sure how to follow along. But it's who we are and what we do that shapes us well into who we need to be. I wonder, what would it be like if we were more ready to claim our identity of being discipleships within a world listening? How would it change us to actually say this out loud and not just some theological footnote and condition? I am a disciple of Christ. It's who I am. Or more challenging still, how would it change us in the way that we lived if we use this as our primary identity and our primary allegiance? That we follow above all else and before all else. I think it would take us places that we've only begun to consider as ours to inhabit. And yes, some of those places could be challenging if we said we are disciples first, come what may. Because we are exactly that, disciples. Imperfect, confused, mistaken, and scared at times, inspired, empowered, and brave at others. Just like some may before and have gone before us, we get to follow on, and we get to make mistakes, and we get to learn along the way. We are being invited into the work of coming and following on behind the Master. That is our call, no matter what the season. What might we be ready to leave in order to follow? I leave you with a question for this week. Who is it that you follow? Are you following after Christ? How might we say yes to the always present invitation to come and to follow and be forever changed? May we each hear the invitation given us and step out onto the road and see where it leads. Amen.